world changes soon. Can get a doobie on a plane, but there's Uzis in our schools. Every dude who touched a boob or a booty getting me too. What you expect from the kids who went to Hooters after school? We're all triggered and defensive. We're all racist and we're sexist. We all grew up watching South Park. How are we offended? Now being fat is beautiful. Name a thing that you can't do. Jumping jacks, run a mile, live past 42. Man, it used to be cool to just flip a bird to the system, and now it's trendy to be triggered and pretend you're a victim. It's my race, it's my weight, it's because I'm a Christian. I hate the internet and anyone who has an opinion. And everybody.
Welcome to the Red Pill Sports Entertainment Show. I am your host, Albert Apache, and as usual, brought to you by Open Source Self-Defense, Fitness, and Grappling. Okay guys, let's go ahead and get into the show. Thank you very much for listening. So we're going to talk a little bit today about who's number one and what is going on with good old Wagner Rocha, what happened between Wagner Rocha and Gordon Ryan at who's number one. We're going to talk a little bit about the aftermath of Stipe Ngannou and John Jones. I really hate it when people make me defend John Jones because I'm not a big fan, but you know, I do respect the man's amazing ability. And then we're going to get a little bit into red flags when it comes to dating the right kind of women that will match your jiu-jitsu journey aspirations. All right. So before we get into it, guys, please make sure you like, you subscribe, comment down below if you disagree with anything I have to say, share the video, help us out. Remember, the goal right now is to get to that 1,000 subscriber mark so we can do some more fun stuff as far as going live, things of that nature, and I'd much appreciate it. So let's go ahead and get into the show. All right, guys, who's number one was this past weekend. We're going to take a look and just break down a couple segments of Wagner Rocha and Gordon Ryan. It is interesting to note where we're going to pick up. We're about 6 minutes in, and because of Wagner's physical style, using his real physical framing style, kind of made Gordon kind of switch up on the style of passing he was using. So originally Gordon was floating the hips, trying to kind of get that leg pummel, shin pummel type pass where he kind of steps over into side control. That really wasn't working out too well. Wagner was doing a really good job. So Gordon kind of switches to this chest-to-chest connection here from the half guard, boom, and passes him out. Now let's take a look at what's going on here in slow motion. So you see the really tight connection Gordon went to here. Notice he's got the crossface here, and then he has the wedge on the opposite side. Really gets Wagner up onto that shoulder. And now he switches his hips. You can see him switch his hips in the background. He's going to reach back here. And what I really like here, some of the details I watch when I watch Gordon, is what he's using to push down on the knee here. Okay. Notice his hand frames first onto the hip, and he's kind of driving with the elbow initially here. Then he goes up, hand onto the thigh. Little by little, look, it inches out, and when you see this quickly, it looks like he pulls that entire leg out instantaneously, but that in fact is not what happens. He actually inches it out. Of course, Gordon gets to mount. Let's go ahead and move on to another segment. So right about here, we're about 10 minutes into the match. Gordon has been controlling Wagner most of the time, but Wagner's been doing a very good job of being patient. And we're going to see Gordon try to transition to a mount position. So you see him cross his legs over. He starts to pull that knee out. At that moment, Wagner kind of realizes what's trying to be done. So he's going to bide his time, and here he switches his hips and he kind of follows Gordon's motions, comes up, extends his hips back out into Gordon Ryan, and then here, right there, boom, beautiful. Okay, so let's take a look at that again. So Gordon comes around. As he comes around here, this is where he plants all of his weight and gets it all on Wagner's left post, his left hand. Now that Wagner's weight is all in his left hand, Gordon leans right over that, tips him right over his own post, over his own base. Beautiful return to the mat, and then Gordon immediately back to the back. Amazing, just beautiful to watch. So at this point in the match, there's already been a second scramble where they actually disengaged and Wagner took the top position. Gordon played his seated guard. Gordon, of course, Wagner tried to sit back for a leg lock. Of course, Gordon was ready for that. Stood up, started passing, and now we have Gordon Ryan passing Wagner's guard once again. So you're going to see kind of going back to a similar setup as earlier on when he passed the guard. But this time, let's see what Gordon does. Notice, he grabs that Kimura grip. He's setting it up. Boom, he has the Kimura grip. Wagner has to respect the Kimura here. He's locking his hands together. Allows Gordon to get that leg out. That's what allows Gordon to get the leg out. Locks up the triangle here. And boom, there is the finish. Let's take a look at that again. So here's the beginning of the end. Gordon sits up, controls the wrist, slides that arm all the way through, grabbing the Kimura grip. Notice how patient Gordon is being, working that foot out, twisting it left, twisting it right. Really, what he's trying to do is set up and get that other foot out the back door. He gets it out the back door, pops through, goes to a triangle setup position, and there we have it, the lockup, and it's done. Amazing, amazing jiu-jitsu from Gordon Ryan. These two guys share a hug. Looks like, mutual respect. Sometimes I think Gordon Ryan does what he does, says what he says to try and sell fights. I actually think that guys in the grappling industry need to learn a little bit from Gordon Ryan about how you need to build up a fight, build up a match, and start getting eyeballs on the match. But it was a really fun match to watch. Wagner did a great job. One thing I kind of took from this is that it seems as if you're going to last against Gordon Ryan. You're going to have a very deep gas tank, and you're going to have a very physical, aggressive game. Wagner, he makes his frames very aggressively. Some call what he does, quote unquote, dirty, but he's absolutely right when he says everything he does is within the framework of the rules. So hopefully everybody can learn just a bit from Wagner and from Gordon, and we'll see better matches for Gordon going forward. Of course, I believe this is going to be his last fight under the Who's Number One banner. I believe this launches him into his one championship contract. So we'll see what one has in store for him. Let's move on.
Exciting right now. And John came out, tweeted, said, "Show me the money." What appeals to you most? Because it seems like that would be an amazing super fight.
If I'm John Jones and I'm home watching this fight, I start moving to 85.
You think that's a fight that you'd like to put together next? I mean, I know we don't matchmake, but that sure does seem exciting.
Listen, I could sit here all day and tell you, what show me the money mean. I tell you guys this all the time. If you can say you want to fight somebody, but do you really want to? Call Hunter right now. We can make that fight tonight, John. Call Hunter right now.
That's the fight to make, would you say?
What's that?
Jones and Ngannou is the fight to make, right?
Well, Derek Lewis is the fight to make. But if John Jones really wants that fight, listen, it's one thing to go out and tweet and say you want it and I put on the weight and I did this and that. Do you want the fight? I promise you. We can call Derek Lewis or one of these other heavyweights and they want the fight. If John Jones really wants the fight, John Jones knows he can get the fight. All he's got to do is call and do it. Like I said, it's easy to say you want the fight, but if you really want the fight, Francis Ngannou is the heavyweight champion of the world right now. All he's got to do is pick up the phone and call Hunter, and we can get the deal done.
All right, man. I hate it when Uncle Dana puts me in a position to have to defend Jon Jones. I respect Jon Jones. I think he's an amazing talent. But I'm going to be really honest. I'm not a fan. I respect the man. I respect his talent, but I'm just not a fan of Jon Jones. That being said, some of the ridiculousness that's been going on for the last year and a half, 18 months or so of disrespecting Jon Jones and his ability. It's like I'm sorry, but it is. It is a, conscious effort to diminish and devalue Jon Jones, in my opinion. And I get it from Dana's perspective. I mean, it only makes sense. You want to pay the guys as little as you can to make yourself and the company as much money as possible. But as we look at Jon Jones and through his tweets, show me the money. Absolutely. He's absolutely right. I mean, can anybody deny that the two money fights that people are going to pay big dollars to see, that you're going to drive massive pay-per-views, is a Jon Jones versus Ngannou, and possibly the next biggest after that would be Jon Jones versus Izzy. Now, some of the luster and shine Jon Jones versus Izzy has been taken off because of Izzy's complete dominance by Jan Blachowicz. Jan completely dismantled Izzy. Really, he shut him out of that fight. I mean, if you really turn down the volume and you watch that fight in silence, Jon Jones completely stifled Jan Blachowicz completely stifled Israel Adesanya. And you can only imagine that a Jon Jones with much better wrestling would do much more and much worse to Israel Adesanya. So I think a lot of the luster off of that matchup has come off. What it showed was that when Israel Adesanya has to be the person that sets everything up, and when you feint back at Israel Adesanya, you can really nullify a lot of what he does. If you continue to stay within your game plan and you don't overreact to Israel Adesanya, you can definitely stay in your game plan and nullify a lot of what he wants to do. Jon Jones goes on, go to 185. I didn't gain all this weight for no reason. If anyone is wondering, I really want to fight. I quit the light heavyweight division, literally gained massive amount of weight, and now people are saying I'm afraid. And the one that really sticks out to me, the tweet that he really put out that sticks out to me, is here where he says, Conor McGregor wants big money, it's expected. Jon Jones wants money, now he's scared. This is absolutely true. Conor McGregor, let's not pretend like Conor has not had his ups and his downs and his suspensions and his things away from the cage. Okay, because a lot of people will point to Jon and all of his problems outside of the cage and say, well, this is why Dana wants to devalue him, this is why Dana doesn't want to pay him too much, this is why yada yada yada. But yet when it's Conor, there's a reason to pay him. Even this next fight with Dustin Poirier, they're trying to find a way to put Conor at the top of a card, of a pay-per-view card. But let's be honest. Okay. Conor, I love Conor. I'm a big fan of Conor. I'm actually a fan of Conor McGregor. Okay. But I can be honest. And I respect his skill. But I can be honest. Conor has now lost to Dustin Poirier. And he's lost to Khabib. Okay. The only, impressive win he's had in years was against Cowboy. And if we're going to be real, everybody was already questioning whether or not Cowboy had one foot out the door, either mentally or physically. he's been in a lot of wars. Cowboy Cerrone has, so you have to take that win with a grain of salt. And then John Jones goes on and I've been working my butt off. Okay, Derek can have the fight. No need to rush. A great thing. And essentially, John just goes on and on about needing to get paid for the fight. Okay. Not wanting to fight. And what you can take, let me translate everything that Dana said. What Dana was saying was, Derek will take the fight. There's a ton of guys that'll take the fight for cheap. That I can pay peanuts and they're going to take the fight. That's what Dana White was saying. What Dana White was saying is that I have a pay-per-view draw in Ngannou all by himself. So I don't need you, John Jones, to sell a pay-per-view fight with Ngannou. I don't need you to sell a title fight or a title defense for Ngannou. I can sell that all by myself or all by Ngannou's self. He can carry a card. People want to see the knockout artist, and I don't need you. And there's plenty of guys who will take this fight for cheap. When he says, you can say you want to fight, you can say you want to fight, but do you really want to fight? What he's really saying is, you can say you want to fight, but are you willing to fight for what I'm willing to pay you? That's what is really being said by Dana White. Now, rightly or wrongly, maybe this is a new strategy for the UFC to get off of the big hype, big money fights. For a while there, some of the purists were starting, the non-casual fans that really follow the sport and really follow the athletes were getting a bit tired of the quote-unquote money fights and people skipping the line and, let's market to the casual. Don't get me wrong, those fights are really fun. There's a time and a place for those fights. That being said, as a MMA fan, right? And I love everything about MMA. So I follow some boxing. I follow jiu-jitsu. I follow wrestling. I follow some Muay Thai. And of course, I follow different MMA. Because I am not just a casual fan, I would say I'm a diehard, if you will, right? Many of the diehards, they want to see, yes, they want to see fun fights, but they also want to see the meritocracy that they believe MMA to be. They want to see guys who have worked their way through the rank get fights. People don't like the boxing model anymore. They realize what's wrong with that. And what I mean by the boxing model is that your guy never fights anybody and he racks up a win column of 20 wins, 30 wins, 35 wins before he fights anybody of note. And that model is somewhat broken. Okay, for you to take 5 to 10 fights against lower ranking opponents, guys who have worse records or similar records to you, that's one thing. But once you pass 8 to 10 fights in MMA, if you're undefeated, it's probably time for you to start cracking into the upper echelon. You should be trying to make that jump into, the UFC and then the top 10. That's what you should be doing with those kind of records when you have that type of record. And, because of that, that kind of changes the model for what is competitive and what is not competitive as far as record-wise. Now, John Jones, on the other hand here, let's just be real. If you're a fan, he has one loss on his record, but we all know that's not a loss. That was not a loss in the sense that he got beat up, right? We all know he has not lost a fight. He's had a technical loss on his record due to a disqualification. But it wasn't like he was losing that fight and, it was some kind of TKO or some desperation, thing that he did that broke a rule, right? He was absolutely smashing the guy. So Matt Hamill was a fighter he was smashing at the time. He was smashing that kid, and I was a fan of Matt Hamill, but look, here's the reality. John Jones put it to him. John Jones absolutely put it to him. So, John being here, wanting to get paid, this is pretty typical. And Dana White needs to act fast if he wants to take advantage of this. I mean, this would make so much news if he could pay both Ngannou and John Jones. I think you could make this. I think this would be the first $1 million fight for both fighters. I mean, this would start to draw. How fast did the UFC, how do you start drawing in the better talent, the better athletes into your sport? By putting a price tag on it, right? Putting price up there. And I think that's exactly why you see, most American athletes gravitate towards baseball, basketball, and football, right? Because of the price tag of playing, what goes along with the pay. See, a lot of times we talk about why can't we compete in soccer, things like that. And the real reason why the United States does not compete in soccer is because our best athletes are not playing soccer growing up. They're not sticking with soccer as they grow up. Why are they not sticking with soccer? Because there's no endorsement money in the United States for soccer. There's no TV deals for soccer. Soccer is not on television. There's no name notoriety. There's no the contracts to play for Major League Soccer are minuscule compared to the other big three sports. Yeah, sure, if you're super good, you can move to Europe, I guess, if that's your dream, if you want to go live in Europe. But let's face it, most kids, most families don't want to up and move their entire family to the other side of the world. That's just not what they're going to do. And so now, if you can start showing that, holy cow, we have the first set of fighters whose base pay for just taking the fight is going to surpass $1 million. The UFC has now arrived with $1 million athletes for fighting, not for all the other stuff, right? Not like McGregor for, this endorsement deal and that endorsement deal and those things and these things, but for actually stepping into the cage and having it locked behind you. It would be absolutely phenomenal for the sport. I think that would drive the next generation of athletes coming into the sport and would really, really up the talent level, because now you could start to say, yes, there is room here to make a living and much, much more as a fighter. Because the reality is, for a very long time in MMA, unless you were the creme de la creme, the top guys, or you were putting your body completely on the line to get the show money, the fight of the night, the knockout of the night, the submission of the night, unless you were really being a super aggressive, really putting your body on the line, you really were not making a ton of money, right? Not from fighting alone. Maybe you were making a little extra from, being, a local celebrity, or, having some type of endorsement deals with, clothing or whatnot. That being said, now, if you can start to break that $1 million ceiling just to fight, just the fight money alone, now you're starting to give these lower tier guys the ability to come in and make a living fighting and purely fighting. And I think that's going to up the talent level. So I think, Dana White should act quickly. I actually think, for Ngannou's sake, I think that Ngannou wants to take this fight early. I mean, if I'm Ngannou and I'm his coach, I'm going to Dana and I'm saying, hey, pay Jon Jones what he wants. Please just pay him what he wants and let me take this fight now. The last thing you want, if you're Ngannou, is for Jon Jones to come into the heavyweight division and adjust to the power for 2 or 3 fights. Smashing guys, learning what it's like to manipulate guys with this kind of weight, and then get to you. Much better to catch Jon Jones now than it is to catch Jon Jones in 2 to 3 fights at heavyweight. And that's my personal opinion. I think Ngannou's chances to beat Jon Jones are the best now. The more fights you let Jon get under his belt at heavyweight, I think that learning curve is very exponential, meaning that, it's very steep at the beginning. But once Jon learns, he's going to rocket ship in understanding. And here's the thing, a lot of people don't understand something, all right? This Jon Jones would be completely in for fighting Ngannou, would take this super serious. But even more so, what's more concerning to me, if I am Ngannou, and why I want to catch him early, is I don't want his camp, in particularly Greg Jackson, to be able to download data on his fighter at heavyweight in order to tailor make a game plan to beat me. When you see Greg Jackson is dialed in with a fighter and he has a mission to put together a game plan, we've seen Greg Jackson put together amazing game plans. We've seen it with Holly Holm when she beat Ronda Rousey. We've of course seen it with Jon Jones plenty of times. And here's the thing. There is a connection. Jon Jones still is one of the few fighters that's out of the Jackson Winklejohn camp, that still has a very close tie to Jackson. And believe me, I know, I watch, I pay attention. Greg Jackson is the tactician. Winklejohn might be doing the coaching day to day and doing a lot of the striking coaching. But the philosophical, the concepts, the tactician portion of that team is definitely Greg Jackson. And Greg Jackson would love a shot at trying to beat a guy who is quote unquote unbeatable in Ngannou, that nobody thinks Jon can beat. I think that's, the fight to make. And so, I really hate it when Dana makes me, have to defend Jon Jones. Like I said, I'm not a big Jon fan. But here's the deal, guys. Jon should get this fight. It is the fight to make. It would be a blockbuster fight. Probably the biggest UFC pay-per-view card. And hopefully they get it done. But that's what I got, guys. If you disagree with me, comment down below. Tell me what you think. And let's hope Uncle Dana gives the fans what they want. All right, man. Let's move on. Okay, guys. Let's start off with a red pill alert. Red pill alert if you have not taken your daily dose of red pills, or you've just started, you better up the dosage, because we're going to dive a little bit deep today. So, one of the things that I've been talking about is making sure when it comes to your jiu-jitsu, right, and young men knowing your worth. Talked about how, if you set yourself up by dating a woman who is not high value, or does not match your values, that they will then nag later on about your training jiu-jitsu. They will try to take that away from you, and it'll be nonstop. And so I've had a lot of younger guys, particularly that I know personally ask me, okay, that's all good and that's all dandy, but how do I know, okay, when I should walk away from a girl? What are some things that I should know? What are my red flags? So today we're going to look at a situation, we're going to listen to an interview, and we're going to look at some of the red flags, and I'm going to try and walk you guys through why each one of these things is a red flag right off the bat. And that way you can know, hey, this is not good. I need to step away from this situation because this is going to cut into my lifestyle, into my happiness, my training as I move forward in life. So let's go ahead and start taking a listen to this interview.
Now tell me, from a man's perspective, tell me if this is just way out of pocket. And this is why we talking prenuptials and shit. On the first date, I had to get my daughter something to eat before he took me out. So I was like, can you run me by the McDonald's real quick because I'm running behind, woo woo.
Okay guys, so number one, first red flag. It's a first date and she's already running late and woo woo. In other words, don't nag me about it. You shouldn't care that I'm wasting your time. What that's showing is she has absolutely no respect for your time. Remember that a first date, okay, everybody's trying to make their best impression, generally speaking, on a first date. Now this would be completely different if she was meeting the guy at the place, right? If she's meeting you somewhere, that's a completely different scenario. If she's running a little bit late or she's running behind, right? Or it's a casual kind of thing, that's different. But when she's having a guy pick her up, so if she's having you pick her up, gentlemen, and she's running late, that ain't cute. Don't play into that, okay? Essentially what she's telling you is your time does not matter to her. Her time's what's matter, and what she's trying to do is from the very beginning, she's trying to establish dominance and who's in control of the relationship, okay? This is what we like to call in the red pill community a shit test. She's already starting a shit test from date number one. This was red flag number one.
We get to McDonald's. All she got was her classic, a milkshake, 4-piece nugget, and a small fry. When the lady at the window asked for the bread,
He's like, where's that?
Yeah.
Okay guys, so if you missed red flag number two is of course the fact that this is a first date and you're already meeting her child. That's very disrespectful to you and a little bit narcissistic parenting, right? It's putting you and the child in a very awkward position. You're about to take this female out on a date. There's like a sexual overtone to that, right? And she's interjecting her child with you whom you do not know, okay? Next, here comes the next part of the shit test, how you can know that this is about utility. She lists the items that were ordered. What essentially that is, okay, is that's her itemizing the bill in her head, okay, putting a price tag, and immediately it's a second shit test, right? I want to see exactly how much I can push the boundaries. She kind of goes on to talk about how, you know, she was like, I asked him, did he want something too? Really? You want me to pay? You asked me? That makes absolutely no sense. Okay, what is he, a child? He doesn't know that he can get something to eat if he is paying anyway. So either the offer to get him something was completely disingenuous, or it just is nonsensical. And this lady has the giant ego. So anyhow, that was essentially red flag number 2 and 3 sitting right there. Let's go ahead and continue and listen to the rest of this little story.
I think that's the
Already,
problem
that was
now.
the first problem.
That ain't no problem.
At that moment,
That's your problem.
Look, and it was at that moment. Now I had the
You
bread,
should've paid for the-
and I even asked him, did he want anything? But look, it was at that moment that I knew you were never getting this pussy.
Okay guys, let me go ahead and break this down for you. Let me start by first interpreting what she says here. So what she really means is that's when I knew that he was not going to allow her to take advantage of him and to use him. Therefore, she was not going to see him as long-term relationship material. She also went on and she essentially let you know that any man that she's with needs to expect that she will be weaponizing sex and physical affection and essentially withholding that to punish whatever man that she happens to be with if she decides to have a long-term relationship with somebody. Okay. Now, the first one, not being used, that goes back to kind of a hypergamy thing, right? She is over the top with her hypergamy mentality. And I guess if you want to say better for her to be upfront with it, but either way, it's not just hypergamy, okay? When people say hypergamy, and many even in the red pill community, I think they think of utility and they think of finances and they think of, material goods. Utility can come in other forms as well. That could be time, okay? It could be affection, whatever the case may be. So essentially, what she's saying is, whatever whim I have, for that month or that week or that year, I will constantly be looking for the next best, the most that I can get in that particular category, whatever that is. And, if I happen to need more time that month, I'm going to look for the guy who can give me the most amount of time. Okay. And it's your fault if you don't give it to me. That's essentially what she's saying. I think most of us kind of as men intuitively know that that's how the game has been set up in our pop culture. So that's a red flag that I think kind of is not so big a deal for us. The bigger red flag for those of us who train jiu-jitsu, and when I say, hey, make sure you pick somebody who isn't going to be harming, your jiu-jitsu journey. What I think is the bigger red flag for us is the fact that she is threatening to use withholding sex and withholding physical affection, because that's not the end of it, okay? Something that's implicit here, it's not directly stated, okay, is the fact that it will not end at simply the withholding of sex. There will also be shaming tactics involved when your eyes wander, or when you decide that you're going to, masturbate, or, whatever you need to do to, in fact, relieve the pressure of not having sex, right? Whatever it is you do, whether that be, you're going to watch, some porn, or you're going to pick up a couple of, magazines, whatever the case may be, or even just another hot female catching your eye. Those shaming tactics are going to come into play, okay? Further, the shaming tactics will not end just there. They will continue and they will roll on into homophobic comments about you rolling around with a bunch of other sweaty guys rather than spending time with her, all those kind of things, okay? So for us, that is the bigger red flag. So understand, gentlemen, okay, when you're picking a female, okay, you have all the red flags we've already talked about. The one that's going to pertain, if your biggest thing is, hey man, I just want to meet somebody who is not going to, shame me for training jiu-jitsu. I want that to be a normal part of my life. The biggest red flags, the two biggest, number one is your time, and number two is going to be utility. Next on the list is this, the withholding of physical affection, okay? Because I guarantee you there are more shaming tactics that will come underneath that, guys. So ensure that you keep that front of mind as you're trying to choose a mate. Now, far be it from me to try to assume I know everything about this female. I do not know everything about her, you know, but I can tell you those are some major red flags for me. And most likely, if you want to be a healthy male and you want to be training jiu-jitsu, those should be red flags for you, gentlemen. Okay, guys, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the show. Thank you so much for listening. Remember, guys, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment down below if you agree, if you disagree, if you have more red flags, maybe things that I missed. Make sure you put that down below. If you have anything to say about the topics that we broke down as far as jiu-jitsu, or you know, any of the other things that we've been discussing, please comment down below. Even if you disagree, guys, really helps out the channel. I appreciate it. All right, man, until next time, remember, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose, guys.
Every dude who touched a boob or a booty getting me too. What you expect from the kids who went to Hooters after school? We're all triggered and defensive, we're all racist and we're sexist. We all grew up watching South Park. How are we offended? Now being fat is beautiful. Name a thing that you can't do. Jumping jacks, run a mile, live past 42. Man, it used to be cool to just flip a bird to the system, and now it's trendy to be triggered and pretend you're a victim. It's my race, it's my weight, it's because I'm a Christian. I hate the internet and anyone who has an opinion. And everybody angry if you say white. Okay, fine. Pass me the brush and I'll paint my face to the shades right. Let's talk about abortion. Sorry, tell me how this works. Bacteria is life on Mars, but a heartbeat isn't life on Earth? Weird. People are so stupid.